Good afternoon, all. Welcome to today's meeting of the Adults, Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Before we begin, could I remind all speakers to switch on their microphones when they wish to speak, and please remember to switch it off after they've spoken. That's mainly for me rather than anyone else, that second reminder. Could I also thank Mrs. Fryer for substituting for Councillor King, who's been unable to make it today. So thank you very much, Hilary, for stepping in to make sure we're all complement. Agenda item 1, minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of June 2024. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of June are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is everybody happy? Thank you. Agenda item 2, there are no questions received from members of the public. Agenda item 3, there are no questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. Agenda item 4, to advise of any items which the Chairman has decided to take as urgent. There are no such items today. Agenda item 5, does anyone have any declarations of interest in any items on the agenda? No, thank you all. Agenda item 6, there are no declarations of the party whip in accordance with the Overview and Scrutiny Procedure Rule 16. And agenda item 7, no petitions have been presented under Standing Order 35. So now move on to the first item on today's agenda, which is the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board Annual Report 2023-24, as set out in pages 13 to 58 of the agenda pack. I'm pleased to say that we are today have the independent chair of the board, Shona Douglas, here, who will present the item. We also have Gary Watts, Safeguarding Partnerships Manager, is also with us today. What I would say, Shona, is clearly everyone's read the report pack, so it may be that just rather than go through it all, there are some specific things you might want to raise. And I also understand you have a short video for us as well. So over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you very much for inviting me this afternoon. And I've got 4 points, 2 of which I'd like to raise before I show a sort of 3-minute video, which I think is quite helpful in terms of quite an important topic for the last couple of items. So just very briefly. So thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to come and attend this meeting and present this report to you about the work of the Safeguarding Adults Board. And I feel very honoured to be a chair and work with the partners that I do on the board. So just feel it's really important as members that you hear that message, because it's not the same in all partnerships, I'm sure you know. So the board is governed, as you know, by the the Care Act 2014, and there are 3 main statutory roles. One is that we have a board and that it's a partnership of all partners in Leicestershire, and we do cover Rutland, obviously, but I'm not reporting on Rutland today, I'm just reporting on Leicestershire. And we also share the Safeguarding Adults Board with Leicester City, and we share many of the subgroups except the Safeguarding Adults Review subgroup, of which Leicestershire and Rutland and Leicester City have their own subgroup for that purpose. We are required to produce a strategic plan and an annual report, which the strategic plan is on our website, and the annual report and the reporting to the public and members, and the chief exec is here today. And the third element is to carry out safeguarding adults reviews, of which are detailed in the report. We may discuss that later. So the business plan sets out the core priorities, because there's day-to-day business around the report, and in addition to that we have areas of which we've mainly focused on, and the areas for this year and next year, we decided we have a 2-year period to look at the priorities, to really embed 3 particular areas of work: self-neglect, mental capacity and domestic abuse for older people, as really solid areas of which required quite a lot of dedicated time. So we've chosen for 2-year period to roll out. So the plan is for 2 years, so you will see the realisation of the work at the end of next year. I think that it's probably just helpful for me just to move into just showing the video, because I think that the main area that I'd kind of wanted to focus on is around the domestic abuse for older people. And this is in relation to some research that's been undertaken with Durham University. So we've been part of that research of looking into retrospective situations where safeguarding was presented, and across Leicestershire and Leicester City, how we as partners, how the partners responded to those in relation, particularly to people who are older. So I just thought it was quite helpful just to show the video first of all.
Domestic abuse affecting older people is often under-recognized and under-reported.
Abuse might happen over many years or begin in later life. Sometimes it builds up subtly over time, making it difficult to identify.
The Duluth Power and Control Wheel, adapted for older people by Dowie's Choice, shows how abuse isn't always physical and can include your partner, ex-partner, or family member trying to control you.
Here are some examples of controlling an abusive behavior.
Criticizing you and making you feel bad about yourself, stupid, or that you always get things wrong.
Saying you can't make decisions, that you have dementia or are losing your mind.
Threatening that bad things will happen if you don't behave how they want.
Sometimes these are small threats,
but they might include threats to harm themselves, you, or the people or even animals that you care about.
Taking control of your money and denying you access to financial information.
They may take money without your permission and not return it.
Exaggerating your care needs, or using them as an excuse to control your medication, what you eat, and where you go.
Without respecting your boundaries, they might make you feel like you have to follow their rules and that you can't say no.
Abuse can also include making excuses for treating you badly and blaming you for their behavior, telling people you are difficult, and presenting themselves as caring and supportive.
Or alternatively, ignoring your needs, making out they are incapable of doing things themselves and that you have to support them.
You might feel you don't have control over your life decisions, be stopped from going places and doing things you enjoy, like trying new things and learning new skills.
Or even learning to use technology that could make your life easier.
You may be stopped from spending time alone with other people, or have the time you spend with family and friends spoiled.
You may feel you have no space or time for yourself.
They might constantly check where you are and what you are doing, listen to your phone calls and read your messages or letters before you.
Abuse can also include using their physical size to scare those around them, being aggressive towards you and the people you care about, and committing physical violence against you or your property.
Maybe the behavior just started or recently got worse. Even if it's always been like this, it doesn't mean it's okay.
The good news is that you don't have to manage this on your own.
There are people you can speak to, confidentially, who can offer you support and explain your options.
Regardless of whether you want to end the relationship or not, talking to someone about the behavior won't mean having to make decisions you're not ready for.
But it will open the door to the help you need to start feeling safer
and happier today.
Thank you. I just thought that that kind of symbolised some of the issues that certainly the research is showing, is that quite often it's not been recognised abuse in older people, and as you see is camouflaged by other things, particularly around dementia and illness. And probably as somebody who's getting old who forgets things, I begin to wonder what's going to happen to me. So, you know, it's those sorts of things that are really important. But this research has been pivotal in really helping us put the mirror across all agencies about how we respond. So that's how police respond in sometimes not being able to recognise those things as we do, as social care, not picking up and looking at the wider elements, in hospital taking at face value. So there are messages across all the agencies around older people and safeguarding as a way of just kind of looking at things with a more critical light. So this is a major piece of work for us this year, in certainly, and obviously working with domestic abuse forums as well across the piece around just creating that much more awareness around older people. And some of the things that have come out of the research is, you know, about the data collection. So we have a data collection, we're formulating our own sort of high level data dashboard, which helps give us a bit of a clue about, are there things we need to look at? Where's safeguarding in the patch? There isn't anything for older people, it all gets grouped in together. So there are elements to look at around how we collect data, how risk assessments are formulated around people who suffer harm. So not only those who kind of cause the harm, but those who suffer. So that equally people who cause the harm in older people may also have their own individual needs, and that maybe they need to be looked at in that context rather than somebody who's causing somebody else harm. Whereas we look at it in the old, in the younger people, in the person who caused the harm, it gets referred to as a perpetrator, and the support goes into the person who is being harmed. And sometimes in these scenarios in older, not in all instances, it's across the piece, is we need to look at each person and their own needs. And the other bit is about moving away from that victim focus, which I've just talked about. So I just really wanted to flag that as a significant piece of work as a result of some really good research. And the subgroups are working together at the moment to formulate a plan around that. But this was one item that we've used with Norfolk to start and promote the elements of safeguarding and older people. The last point I really want to raise is around the role of assurance. And obviously, and as an independent chair, and my role is to be assured that the partners are operating and protecting people in our community. But I also view it as a role around helping and supporting and facilitating, and not just about have you done things, but about how are we doing it together? How are you all assuring each other? And that's what I think is solid about this partnership, is we do work, and the partners work in a very collective way, and we'll do things in that way. So I think that's a really good element of that assurance. And just to kind of flag that we are continuing to do the day-to-day business, which is we look at the data, we undertake audits, which are referred to in the report. And I'm here today really to present this report to you and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shona, and thank you for making the video available as well, which I thought was very good. I think Barry wants to go first.
Thank you, Chair. Shona, just picking up on that last point you made where you said all the partners working together, how you're assuring everyone's doing what they need to be. If I look on the attendances on page 46, I can see district and borough councils and Department of Work and Pensions hardly turn up. So what impact has that had on how you're all working together if the people that are meant to be going to the board aren't attending?
So I think there's two things about that. Is yes, if I recall last year, I think one of the members asked for this, and we said we'd produce it in this year's report, in the very reason that you've actually highlighted, is it flags where attendance is. And Gary and I have got appointments, or arranging appointments, with both the rep from the District Council, who's from Melton District Council, and the Department of Work and Pensions, particularly now because the Department of Work and Pensions are certainly very tuned in, and there are specific people targeting safeguarding in there. So we're meeting with them to look at what's the block stop that, and why hasn't that happened? And in a sense, I can't demand that people attend. I have to try and influence. So I think part of our start is to look at that. And the impact is they don't get fairly represented, and therefore information doesn't get disseminated. So our role is to pick that up, certainly in light of what you've said, in order to address that and find out the reasons why. So hopefully when I come next year, we don't have those gaps.
Sorry, Leon.
Thank you, Chair. How do you measure your success? Because it's not clear to me. Okay, I understand you do research, you examine, you observe, you record, but all this is actually to do something and change things. So I'm a bit confused as to what you do and how do you measure your success?
That's a really good question, Councillor. So there's several ways that happens. The subgroups that operate underneath the board, which are usually of partners from the front line, meet to put in place some of the measures and actions that come out of the work. So there's data that I talked about. So we look at data. So is it telling us that there's a high number of safeguarding cases in a particular organisation? We look to interrogate that data-wise. Then we look at some of the practice that comes from that. So you've seen examples of some of the audits. And if we look at the threshold audit that was referred to, partners actually found better results than they expected. And I think there was quite a surprise that when they looked at the threshold applying around safeguarding, they thought that the results weren't good, but actually the evidence showed that the practice was better than they'd expected. And that's reported back to us. So the other elements of that are looking at those audits and ensuring that over time we go back and revisit that practice. So it's not one kind of element. The other issues are around safeguarding adults reviews, which are sadly when things don't quite work out, and that's around the multi-agency partnerships, and the action plans come from that. We have to then measure in terms of quality data, what is that telling us? And one of the reasons that I've tried to develop a bit of a high level dashboard of, say, 10 performance indicators, which are related to everyday practice and related to some of our priorities, give us some indicators about whether we are doing well or not well, or we need to interrogate looking at that in order to improve practice. And I guess that the way of kind of measuring that is that the feedback from people who are recipients of a safeguarding service or are part of that safeguarding pathway have a good experience. And that's still a bit of a gap that we've got. It's not, Leicestershire isn't any different than many other places. It is a challenge in safeguarding to get that feedback always routinely from people who are part of a safeguarding pathway or investigation or inquiry or those things, because they don't want to have contact with us. But it is our way of continually looking at whether the experience that they've had has been helpful and useful, and that practice has improved so that we don't get the same things raised time and time again. That's part of the way. So it's a number of features of those subgroups that report to us to offer us as assurance. Not always, we might want to do more work, but that's broadly how we look at measuring whether we're being successful in our work.
And I continue with a follow-up question. Thank you very much for your answer, but I'm still a bit confused. Can you give us an idea how many cases are you dealing with in a year and how many of them are considered successful according to your audits? An idea, approximately.
So how many cases in a year? So in the audit, and I haven't got the same pages as yourself, but if we look at the threshold audit, I think they detail the number of cases, and I think it was 2/3, if I recall, were kind of meeting the required kind of threshold for that. So they haven't actually got the number in here, but I think they looked at, I think it might have been 10 cases and it was 2/3. But we would look to those those ones that aren't meeting that threshold, why they're not, and what needs to be done in terms of learning, development, action by that particular agency or action by the multi-partners. When you talk about success in terms of the numbers of cases that are being dealt with, I guess the data that's in here refers to the full data over the year, which is the number of concerns and inquiries. I wouldn't be able to tell you how many are successfully dealt with. I can report to you the categories of abuse and the measures of success around making safeguarding personal, for example, those who are taken out of risk. So if we look at it's under making safeguarding personal. If we take the example of risks removed, risks remained, and making safeguarding personal, 95% of those cases were a personalised service. That's a good measure of success in that instance.
Thank you very much for your response. I would like to make a comment. Actually, it would be very useful in the future to give us an idea about how many cases you have per year and how many actually have been resolved successfully and how many not. Thank you.
Bill?
At this point, the districts aren't taking part in this. If you've got no success when you talk to them, could you let the chair know, and we can perhaps use an alternative route to get into the chief execs of the districts to actually amend and to comply, rather than wait another year?
I think I can assure you, Bill, that there are two district leaders sitting at the table here today who will,
Yes.
who may raise it at the district leaders meeting on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you. And the other one is on page 21, the football pitch. That's a very good example of showing how things are working out in a nice visual way, and I do think that's a good idea.
Thanks, Bill. Any other members? Right, so it's can I sneak in before you, Christine, or do you want to come in before me? Oh, go on then. I cannot deny a portfolio holder. It'd just be wrong.
Yeah, just as leader, thank you very much for the report. And I did find that video very useful, because I must admit I hadn't thought of some of them as being a safeguarding issue. Ted is my representative on the safeguarding board, because he supports me in quite a lot of things. So thank you very much for a good report. That was all I wanted to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just pass one comment about
Of course.
About the district council? So the district of Melton are the district that lead for the district council for the safeguarding board. So they have one rep which represents them all, if that's helpful to those members.
Thank you, Sharon. I think we're aware of that. In fact, weirdly, we will both be at Melton, Joel and I, on Wednesday morning. So we'll be in the ideal location to query the attendance. Just a couple of things from me. I mean, on page 24 of our pack, which is safeguarding data, we picked up that you changed the methodology by which you counted the number of concerns, hence the dramatic fall. Had you done any work on what the number for 2022-23 would have been had it been done on the same basis? Because it's very difficult for us to get a grasp on how 1732 for this year compares to what it would have been for last year on the same methodology.
Thank you, and I'm going to look to John to help me out, because it's his team that actually provide the data for us. But before I hand over to John or land him to Lance, it's just that the data isn't obviously as consistent because of COVID, and that is slightly skewed data. So, you know, I experience that there's been quite a blip in that, but I'll hopefully John will be able to answer the question for me.
Yes, so there's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is no, we haven't. The long answer is, so up until this year, we were counting a number of inquiries into the department as safeguarding alerts, when in fact we probably shouldn't have been doing so. So when we looked at what we were doing compared to other authorities, it appeared that we had an awful lot more safeguarding alerts than other authorities. And that was because we were counting what we call concern for welfare, which is just a concern that comes in about somebody's welfare, and we were putting it through a safeguarding route, and we probably shouldn't have been. So the denominator, the total number that we were looking at, was much larger than it should have been. So this year we've made some changes to be much more specific about what is a safeguarding alert and what's a concern for welfare. So that's why the number of alerts has gone down considerably. What you'll also see is that the number of inquiries, and an inquiry is where we take the safeguarding alert and then we look at it, we do a threshold decision, and we decide it needs a proper assessment under the safeguarding route. And those inquiries have actually gone up over that period and doubled over that period. So we've now got a position where we've gone from being a complete outlier in terms of having 10% of all of our alerts turn into inquiries, to a position where we've got 46% of our alerts turning into inquiries. And we think, and Matt want to come in terms of some of the data here, but nationally it's about 30-something%, I think. So we were a very big outlier in terms of having 10% against the national figure of about 30. We've now got 46. We've only been running this for 2 quarters, so we're not sure where that will land at the end of the year. But clearly what we are doing is we are not measuring against last year, but we're measuring ourselves this year against other authorities to see whether or not we've got the right balance, or whether we've got sort of gone a bit too far in the other direction. But Matt, I don't think you know.
Thanks, John. Yeah, it's a perfect answer. I think the only thing I would add perhaps to that is just some contextual information. So where John mentioned that we were 10% in 22-23, the national average at that time was around 32%, with a number of authorities way into the 40s or even 50%. And even within the East Midlands, you had authorities, again, around that low 40s position. So the 45%, we're monitoring that and it feels comfortable compared to where we've seen other authorities. 23-24 data will be released in the autumn, so we'll be able to pick up on that as well. But certainly the change we've made brings us in line with where other authorities are, really.
Thanks, Matt. Also, Leon.
Actually, this is very interesting for me, because you see, obviously you are doing benchmarking with other authorities. How do you choose the other authorities? Is it actually a group of volunteers? And do the demographics compare between these authorities which are taking part in the benchmarking?
Yeah, there's 2 ways there's 3, I suppose, that we compare ourselves, both within safeguarding and across all kind of performance areas. And certainly when I come back here in January, we'll have a much more detailed picture of that comparisons. First and foremost, there's the East Midlands, and that is obviously the 10 authorities across the geographic area. It does include authorities that are slightly different to us. So you've got unitary authorities in Derby City, Leicester City, etc. But then what we do also have is a peer group of authorities, which is somewhere in the region of about 15 shire county councils. Now, they're not just chosen at random. There is a good look at the kind of the demographics of each area, including Leicestershire, obviously. And from that, then we will have 15 other similar authorities that we can compare against. The final point really is just a national picture, just to try and smooth out any kind of differences between unitaries and shires and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's good options there for doing good comparison, really.
Thanks for that, Matt. Just a couple of final questions from me then. On Appendix B, which was obviously the business plan, quite a few of the timescales have passed and have passed within this reporting year, but I saw no response to those in the actual annual report. I just wonder, for something like Appendix B, it would be useful to have perhaps another column or 2 at the end to actually say, did it happen and what was the outcome? If it's not going to be contained in the report. And before you respond to that one, my final question was about the video, which I thought was very good, is what would somebody have to key into Google to get that to come up? Because these videos are great if you can dress sort of, so if you felt a family member was abusing you, for argument's sake, and you're an elderly person dressed looking to search, what would you have to put in to actually, for something like that to come up, to actually give you the contact information and to give you that thought process about whether you were a victim of such behaviour?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. The answer to your question about Appendix B is completely agree with you. This is the kind of the setup of the plan, not the kind of updated version of where we're at. And I think it was included purely to let you see that it's over a 2-year period, but absolutely agree with you. And it may be more preferable for it to be within the annual report as an appendix, I think we would probably think, for next time. So thank you for that kind of point. That's really helpful. And what you put into Google, so there's a number of videos that are on the website, which are on the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding website. So if you put safeguarding adults Leicester, it would come up. So we've put a number, doing a lot more of the YouTube, so it's on YouTube. So we're trying to kind of access much more global issues. Obviously, it's been adopted by Norfolk and ourselves, and we would, the videos, we try and share them as much as we can with others in order that people have that information. So with regards to the Google bit, you would find it on our website. And there is another video, that a little cameo that's referred to in the report, which you'll have seen, which is about was not brought. And it's one of those issues about when professionals have appointments with people and they don't turn up. Do they follow up? Do they go and find out why this person didn't follow up that appointment? And then the classic kind of response sometimes has been in the past is didn't come and they don't follow up, closed case. And what we're trying to do is to kind of open up that. Certainly staff are much more open nowadays in terms of following up when people don't come up, because people have so many more complexities in life. And in my sort of 47 years in social care, I would say the sorts of situations that people present are so complex now with so many issues. It's even more important if people don't turn up to find out why. So if you're an older person and you're at home, why didn't you come for that health check? So there are a range of those videos which hopefully help and target and make it more accessible for people to have the numbers to contact, as you saw at the end, or the email addresses to contact us.
Hilary?
Thank you very much, and thank you to Shona for a very full report and the videos. I'm wondering, Chair, through you, would it be, Chair, I'm wondering whether, as this is so important, and I know we expect all our councillors to read these reports and see the videos, but do you think it would be useful if an email was sent to all councillors highlighting the importance of the videos? I mean, there's 56 of us, and in this room there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of us, and we obviously will read the report and we'll do it, but this would be so useful to go out to as far and wide as we can, because people like parish councils, district councils, that's all I was just asking whether it would be. Thank you.
No, thanks, Hilary. I'll come back to you just in a second, Shona. I just wanted to throw it out to Christine and Ted as well that we do regular Tuesday afternoon briefings here, don't we? Generally 4 to 5. I just wonder if something like this could be the subject of one of those briefings for members, so that would come out to all members, and then it may be that could then be made available to the wider councillor family, particularly the second and third tiers, to show to their members a way of doing it. So is that something perhaps I could leave for Christine and John to think about as for one of those Tuesday afternoons? I think it would be extremely useful and for all councillors to see the video. So I think it's an excellent point, Hilary, and I think it's one we can take away. Sorry, Shona, I know you wanted to come back in.
No, really happy to put together a little kind of short letter or kind of briefing. If that would help as a board, we can certainly do that. And I'm going to talk to John, we can put together that as well if that's helpful. So yes, happy to work with that.
That would be great. Thanks, Shona. I think Hillary's made the point, and it was part of the question I asked about how do we make sure this is accessible to the people that need it. It's all well and good us sitting here, but if you're a person sitting there thinking, where do I go to check whether I am being coerced or something, we've got to make that information as available as we can, or at least make it to a wide enough audience they might come across somebody who can point them in the right direction. So I think that's extreme. So thank you for that, Hilary. Any further questions? In which case, could I thank Shona very much, not just for presenting today, but actually for doing the job. I think we sometimes forget that we need volunteers to do these roles, and fewer and fewer people, unfortunately, volunteer these days. So thank you very much for that. I think as councillors, we all care about people volunteering in our communities and looking after the most vulnerable. And I know you didn't say a lot, Gary, but thank you for coming as well. Even if you get remuneration, it's still a valuable service. We're now moving on to agenda item 9, which is the performance report for Q1 2024-25, April to June, as set out in pages 59 to 72 of the agenda pack. Matt's already leapt up to the table, covering the previous one. I normally say, John, do you want to introduce this? And he normally says no, go straight to Matt. So I'll go straight to Matt unless John throws something at me. But again, we've been through the report, so perhaps you might just want to pick out one or two salient points. Matt, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So I won't go into a lot of detail then of the report, if that's the case. Just to point out that it is the Q1 report. It's still only the first 3 months of the reporting year. And I think probably, I know it's almost a repeated paragraph, perhaps in the background, paragraph 5, where I reflect on the Care Data Matters project within the Department of Health and Social Care. And this is a big change in recording and reporting of adult social care data. And I feel like every quarter I come here, I'm bringing an impact of that move, and this time's no different. Some of you may have noticed that the sequels recording and reporting that I include in the appendix has dropped out whilst we await a kind of clarification how that's going to be reported from NHS England. So that's still in there, and I think worth noting, this is the final time I'll come here with an almost outdated national average. Really, it's still for 22-23. When I come back in January, we'll have a full look at how Leicestershire's performance fits against the national picture. So I'll bring that to you in my next report. Into the detail of it then, I'm conscious of picking out some of the salient points really. I think possibly paragraph 11, waiting for an assessment. This is a key focus within adult social care at the moment, and again, NHS England are working on definitions of how they can report that from the data that we report into them, or the changing data that we report into them. So for the moment, and in this report for sure, we pick up on a local way of doing that, and that is looking at how many people are awaiting an assessment within the social care teams. At the end of the quarter, there were 604 people awaiting an assessment. That compares to 773 at the end of the previous quarter, and it's a similar helpful downward trend in terms of those waiting for 6 months or more. That was 29 at the end of June compared to 36 at the end of March. The following paragraphs, we pick up reablement. We know that's a strong area of performance within Leicestershire, and the outcomes for people there in terms of having no further ongoing services or living at home post hospital discharge. And that's been maintained despite, as pointed out in paragraph 12, an increased use of that service. It's up 18% compared to the first quarter of last year. Paragraph 14 is permanent admissions, and again, very early in the year, so I won't dwell on those figures in there at the moment. We do try to forecast a full year picture. That will get stronger as we go through the year. And paragraph 16 really is pretty much as it was in my previous report. That relates to surveys. Nothing's happened since. It's kind of an annual piece of work, the surveys. But again, in January, we'll have a full look at that with how our kind of findings compare to other authorities. I think paragraph 17 possibly is worth just pausing on a moment. That's relating to safeguarding, given the previous paper that we had. And within that, towards the end of that paragraph, we look at a new national indicator. So one of the questions about how do we understand success, sometimes that's driven to an extent by what nationally we're having to report and what they set up as metrics. And there is a new indicator in the National Performance Framework around where an inquiry has identified a risk or an alleged risk, and that's been reduced or removed. So we don't yet have that context of where we stand against it, but we do have our position this year and last year, which was when we started collecting it. So at the end of the first quarter, 95%, or 169 out of 177 inquiries where a risk had been identified, it was reduced or removed, and that is very similar to the previous year at 96%. Just briefly then, looking at communities and wellbeing, we don't have a national framework for communities wellbeing. We set local targets, and then we set kind of monthly milestones to track that we're on course to meet that target. So for things like heritage sites visits, they're doing well. They're on track. For libraries, it's slightly more of a mixed picture. A much improved position in terms of physical visits to libraries compared to last year, but we're just short of that milestone where we'd like to be, and I think that's going to be something to do with the summer reading challenge, which will bring us back up to speed when I come next. That summer reading challenge runs July through to September, so we're still in the mix of that just about, but I think that will have an impact. Junior loans was another area where it was lower than where it was last year. Free loans, for electronic loans, I come here every time and I say they never stop. We think there's going to be a peak at some point, but for now, yeah, 48,000 more in the first quarter of this year compared to the similar period of last year. The final point, perhaps to pick up on communities and the wellbeing side, is the adult learning service. It is there. They don't run on a reporting year like the rest of it. It's an academic year, and they have fallen slightly short of that 90% target, coming in at 84% for the year. Now, some of that's been put down to GCSEs, English and Maths, which I think last time I was here was noted that is actually a national issue as well. And certainly since I wrote the report, the GCSE results have been published. So again, when I come back in January, we'll have a little more delve into that and just see how that compares to other authorities, essentially. So that's it, Chair, unless there's any further.
Thanks very much, Matt. Any questions? Joel?
It is quarter one, so I understand it's early days. But just on number 14, because on paragraph 14, it's the one where we want people to stay at home and be as independent as possible. And I know the last paragraph says it might change. Quarter one is gone and a little bit into what's gut feeling? Is it going to change for the better, or are we looking, because that costs us a lot of money as well?
Apologies. I think at the moment we're still in a similar state where we reported there for quarter one, both for working age adults, those under the age of 65, it was just slightly short of where it was last year, which is a good thing. And yeah, I'm confident that has continued into the few weeks since the end of quarter one. For older people, obviously bigger numbers. And again, at this stage of the game, I think that's very similar to where we were in this report, in the sense that I think I reported 849 as a forecast for the year, 858 was last year, so not a great deal of difference, and I'd say that is generally the position.
Bill?
Sure. Page 62, visits to libraries. This is the county council run libraries. What have we got about the community run libraries? Any information on that at all?
Yes, there is a line in the appendix, if you bear with me. Yes, so I don't have a page number, unfortunately, on me, but it's the second page in Appendix A. Yeah, so that's got the libraries information, primarily around the council-run libraries, but there are a couple in there around issues. It's not actually visits, but it's issues around community-managed libraries. So we can see there that the actual number of issues is around about the same position this year compared to last year. So total community library issues, 69,500 compared to 70,000 the previous year. And when it comes to children's, it's 39,000 pretty much this quarter and last. So I don't actually have visits to hand, but that's a position there with the actual use of the community managed libraries, if that helps. Thank you.
Right. So just one from me then. The problem with getting older, as you're discovering 20 or 30 years time, Matt, is that your memory goes. So if I look at 24, I think it is paragraph 24, where we talk about Leicestershire Adult Learning Service, with my one grey cell, by the time I got down to the chart at the bottom, and then had on page 66 at the bottom, I think it just says LAS success. My one grey cell had forgotten what that stood for, despite the fact it was earlier in the report. And bear in mind, this is a public report. I just wonder if we can either, in brackets, put there's an acronym down below, or actually, rather than have the acronym down below, actually spell it out, so that anyone perhaps just go into the charts who hasn't read the first report would know what LAS stood for. And I know I should have known, but I'd completely forgotten. And I did test it earlier with some of my colleagues who were as blank as me, so I felt slightly better at that point.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that amendment's been made ready for next time already. So yeah.
Well, it looks like you've escaped easily, but you've given us such a thought for January. We're already salivating, looking forward to it. And I think we've probably got 20 or 30 questions while you're ready. So thanks very much, Matt, as always. And we'll hold you to greater account, I'm sure, in January, because you've given us that promise to look forward to. We're now moving on to agenda item 10, which is the Annual Adult Social Care Complaints and Compliments Report 2023-24, which is pages 73 to 92. And it's, John is being assisted. It's being supported by Chelsea O'Neill, Corporate Complaints and Information Services Manager. So welcome over there in the corner. I saw you sneaking into the corner rather than volunteering to sit next to John. Very wise move. So who's kicking off? Straight to Chelsea, thank you.
Thank you. So we did see a significant increase in complaints throughout the year. There was 382 complaints received compared to 204 the year previous. But still, when set against the overall volumes in receipt of long-term support, it still only makes up a small percent that do go on to make a formal complaint, so approximately 2%. The most common complaint themes were around care planning, so a broad area, often relating to professional decision making or professional opinion. Charging complaints continued to be received in a significant volume during the year, mainly relating to timescales for completion of financial assessments, which made up about 35% of the complaints received. Overall, there was no significant changes to the types of complaints that we did see throughout the year. We did see an increase in the number of complaints where fault was identified. So fault was identified in 50% of complaints throughout the year, in comparison to 30% the year previous. The main cause for this has been a lot of the complaints were solely about delays in the service. It's almost more likely that we'll hold any complaints about delays, which is kind of had that knock-on effect. We've seen more complaints about delays, so there's a high percentage that have been identified with fault. 43% of complaints were responded to within 10 working days, and 73% were responded to within 20 working days, which is again an improvement from the previous year. So good to see that despite the increase in volumes, we've managed to see an improvement in the response timescales. Overall, 95% were responded to within the 40 working days, only seeing 3 that exceeded the statutory maximum time limits. All cases were quite complex and waiting for a review of the original decision.
Onto stage 2 complaints, 29 were received, were reviewed by senior manager throughout the year. Again, a reduction from the previous year where we saw 44. And we also saw a improvement in the timeliness at this stage as well, with 90% being completed within the 20 working days. LGO complaints, so there were 19 complaints considered by the LGO throughout the year, which is approximately about 5% of the total volume. A slight increase again from the previous year, so that's a positive. The LGO made 17 final decisions throughout the year. A fault was found in 4 instances, and obviously details are included in the report. This was also a decrease from previous year, where they found fault in 9 instances. There's been good learning throughout the year of how we can make improvements moving forward. In 37% of the cases where fault was identified, clear actions were highlighted by the investigating managers that focused on improving future performance. So things like staff training, amending policies or processes, or completing any system changes, which are some of the work that was completed within the service. Just on balance, and finally, there was 52 compliments that were received about adult social care services during the year. An increase from previous year again. So last year there was 29 that was received. So it's good to see that there's more compliments being received and acknowledged throughout the complaints team, and that's recognising the good work that's been taking place. And the team do still continue to encourage managers to make sure that feedback's being recorded to add a bit of balance to the report. I think they're the main points worth noting from the full report.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. Any questions? Harry.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking through on page 81, when you look at the complaint things the last 2 years on that care planning, obviously that's gone up from 40 to 141, which is quite a jump. I wondered if we had a bit of background into that. Thank you, Chair.
Bear with me, just get the page. I'll have to go away and look at the specifics, but it's mostly in terms of kind of the home care and residential care, but it's not fully detailed in the report, so I can go away and see what the further drill down on those are and bring that back for you.
I think John's about to leap in as well.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, well, I haven't got the detail either, but I think what it relates to is, as Chelsea's already said, we had a very big increase in complaints about delays and decision making, and most of those would have been in that care planning and assessment, those 2 boxes of care planning and assessment. And I think it's related back to a couple of things really. One is that, as we've reported here on a number of occasions, demand coming into the department has risen considerably over the last 2 years, and the number of people who have been waiting for assessment and the time it takes to get from referral through assessment into care planning and support planning has been more than we would want it to be certainly over the last 18 months. So the last report that Matt's brought showed that 18 months ago we had 1,500 people waiting. We're now down to 600. So I would hope that over the course of the next 12 months we see a reduction in the complaints in that area. But it's understandable that people complain, and I think that's also understanding why the fault found rate has gone from 30% to 50%, because I think we're just being open and honest about the fact that, yes, we accept that there are delays, and we wouldn't want there to be delays, but it's the fact that there have been. So we have to be open to that. But I think that's probably the reason why you've seen such a big increase in that area.
And so on that basis, I mean, obviously this highlights where there's some issues, and obviously the next thing is when the next reports start coming through, are we improving? So are we comfortable that we're doing things that should improve these figures?
Yeah, well, as I say, I mean, I think if my suggestion is right, that a lot of this relates to delay, then hopefully the fact that we are assessing people more quickly, that we are therefore getting people care more quickly, should bring these figures down. What we'll have to do is we'll have to look at the Q1 report for this year and the Q2 report for this year to see whether or not it looks like we're making a difference in that area.
Any other questions from members? Jill, did you wave at me? All right. Just on that final point, John, are we confident that that number is going down? So there's been a quantum leap forward in number of cases awaiting, which has gone down significantly from the 1,500 odd to 600. Are you confident that the changes presumably which have been made into process will actually bring that down even? I know we'll never avoid it. There will always be delays, but where would you like it to be, and when do you think you can get there?
That's $60,000 question. Yes, I mean, it depends on how you count these things. That's the first thing to say. So I know, for example, that there are authorities who will tell you that they have absolutely no delays for people being allocated for assessments. That's because they allocate everything that comes through the door. But then there's a huge delay from allocation through to completion of assessment, because whereas we take the view that actually we'd want to allocate everything. We have a risk-based approach, and we don't want social work and caseloads and occupational therapy caseloads to become enormous and unwieldy. So we base our decisions on risk, and we therefore have a delay. We have approximately 150 people a week, new assessments a week. So, overall, we've got 50,000 contacts a year. Out of that 50,000 contacts a year, around about 150 go through onto assessment. New people go onto assessment every week. We set a standard that says we want to get to everybody within 28 days, for example. At any given time, you'd have 600 people waiting, wouldn't you? We have 600 people waiting. I'm not saying that's necessarily where we'd want to be. I'd like to get to everybody in less than 28 days. I'd like to get to everybody within a couple of weeks. Therefore, I'd need to get that figure down to 300. Then, of course, you've got the issue of, well, okay, so you've allocated that person to an assessment. How long does it take to get the assessment done and completed? Again, nationally, there's no figures for this in the Care Act. The Care Act doesn't give any indication of how long it should take. It just says it should be a reasonable amount of time. In the old world, we used to have a performance indicator that said that should be 28 days. So from allocation to completion of assessment, it should take no more than 28 days. And then, of course, you've got, how long does it then take from completion of the assessment to actually getting the care through the door? So once we've assessed a person and said you need 3 calls a day or whatever it happens to be, how long does it take? We don't have people waiting for care. So we have people waiting for assessment, and we have people in assessment waiting for that to be completed. We don't have anybody waiting for care. Once we take the decision, we can get care within a couple of days. But there are, so there are some authorities that don't have people waiting for assessment, but have lots of waits for care at the other end of it. So it's a difficult one. We are still waiting, as Matt said. NHS England are looking at the data now. They will be coming out by the end of this year they've already started to do draft reports. They haven't made them public yet, but they are coming out with a measure. So there will be a national measure by the end of this year, by which all authorities will be measured. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. I think we will probably, Leicestershire, having seen the draft data, my view would be that we would probably be, I wouldn't say top quartile, but certainly top half in terms of, this is a strange way to put it, people waiting, i.e. in the better half, the lower half, if that makes sense. But so yeah, it's a complicated kind of conundrum.
But just on that point, John, if I've understood you correctly, I think what you appear to be saying to me is that you are comfortable that we provide a more honest assessment of a delay rather than trying to fiddle the figures by allocating when you know that you're building in delays without reporting. So I think what you're saying, if I understand it, is you are comfortable that Leicestershire County Council, as we always should be, is given a far more honest assessment of the position than other councils may do, which I think reflects well on us, even if we therefore have more complaints on it. It's a more honest level, giving us confidence as councillors that we are doing everything we can.
I would like to think that's the case, but certainly once we get the data from NHS England, we'll be able to tell you empirically whether that is the case or not.
In the absence of no further questions, thank you very much, Chelsea. And we're now moving on to next sheet of paper, which is stuck together. Oh, goodness me. We're now moving on to agenda item 11, which is a report on the peer review of Pathway for Adulthood at pages 93 to 124 of the agenda pack. John's doing this together with Sangtok, if I got that pronounced. Oh, excellent. That makes me feel good. So with Santok's Delay, Assistant Director, and Claire McWilliams, Head of Service. Again, just work on the assumption we've all read the reports in detail. I've missed somebody off here, haven't I? Who's snuck in that I've missed? Trace. Oh, you're ahead of time. All right. I shall just move you to. I shall introduce you later. If you just assume that obviously we've read the report, but I'll perhaps point out any salient points that you feel that need reinforcing or expanding on, not covered in the report, would be great.
I'll just introduce very quickly. So this is a report on a peer review that was undertaken in May. It was undertaken as part of the sector-led improvement work that we do across the region. So it's part of our improvement journey. We have a peer review every 2 years. Each local authority in the region has one, and we chose this year to have our review. Our key line of inquiry was on the Preparing for Adulthood pathway. So I'll let Santok and Claire go through the detail.
Thank you, John. Afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to pick up the key points, as you said, it's taken as read, the report has been digested. It's crucial to point out that the sector-led improvement really, there's a purpose to it. The function is to identify the strengths within and areas for future focus to really kind of sharpen that service delivery going forward, and that's what we did. The main questions we were asking the peer-led review to deliver is what is working well, what does not work as well and why, what are those issues, what are those barriers, and what areas do we need to prioritise going forward and why that is so. Why PFA? A good question to answer really. If we can get it right with our children and our young people very, very early on, but then maximising independence for those young people as they move into the world of adulthood, we're maximising their resilience to becoming adults and dealing with life circumstances. So it's crucial, which then if we get that absolutely right, has a knock-on impact on adult social care going forward as well, in terms of less dependency on services and more independence out there. The key line of inquiry, as it says in the report, is to review the effectiveness of the current pathway to adulthood for young people within Leicestershire to ensure timely independent outcomes. And that's really crucial, is the outcomes we're trying to deliver for young people and best value for the authority are achieved. So in order to deliver that, they looked at our policies, our PFA policies, preparing for adulthood policies. They looked at our case recording, the quality, the content. They spoke to our staff members within the Young Adult Disability Service, and they spoke to partners and wider stakeholders in order to get a triangulated view of how good the service is. I'm just going to move on to the key findings, really, the key good pieces of work that they acknowledge, and then pick up the areas of focus. So the first one was that we actually have a staff group that is highly motivated, focused on delivering really good outcomes for our young people, and absolutely working in partnership, which is really crucial when you think that most of our children and young people with disabilities live in a system where they're interfacing with the adults, they're interfacing with health, education, housing. So it's really good to have that partnership approach. A positive we had and they identified was that we had realistic caseloads. So staff were not full of stress and unnecessarily. They could manage a caseload that they've been allocated and deliver and work with the families and the young person themselves. We've got really good evidence, and they identified that, of good practice, good skills, good joint working, and that was really good. It was positive to hear that being fed back to us, that we're delivering that. We've got really good, clear processes for those young people with an education healthcare plan, an EHCP, and those individuals normally have children's social work, education or adult social care, and health inputting into those education and healthcare support plans. The fact that we've got a clear process, which means there's less stress for families and carers trying to identify what that pathway is. So that's really good to hear. We're also very, very good at co-producing support plans with the children and young people. So we involve them in terms of their aspirations, where they want to be. We involve their families and their carers in terms of developing those support plans. So it's actually owned by all the people involved in the process. We're also very good at reviewing the support plans and being very clear about what those outcomes are. I think those were really, really good pertinent points for us to look back and actually reflect that we've got that in a way that's positive and really kind of something we should be shouting about. In terms of areas of improvement, we do need to develop further our links with wider partners and stakeholders. That was clearly coming across to us, that there's a need to maybe enhance that relationship we have, that joint working with our education colleagues, our SEND colleagues. So that's an area for future focus for us. We've also got to focus on developing shared training and shared practice, which absolutely makes sense, that if we're all working to the same outcome, which is independence, resilience, maximising people's opportunities, then collectively as partners we should be singing from the same sheet and training in the same manner and developing that together. What isn't clear, and it was interesting, and I think we were cited on this, that we have a cohort of young people, children and young people that don't actually have an EHCP. They have maybe possibly learning difficulties, but there isn't a clear pathway for those individuals in terms of supporting them into the world of adulthood. And that's something that the review picked up and highlighted for us. So a clear piece of work that we'll focus on going forward. And the other key thing for us is really is about how we take these actions, these areas of focus, and move them into our corporate-wide review, the PFA, which is underway at the moment, our internal review of the PFA pathway. And we've done that in terms of the action plan, which I think is attached as an appendix. A couple of other areas of focus for us was that our closure summary, so each case or each documentation has a closure summary at the end of it to summarise exactly the work that's been done, the outcomes achieved, and what are the next steps. We were reminded that we need to enhance the quality of that, so that's another an area for us to pick up going forward. And finally, just to recognise a real good strength was the actual review team come together with children and adults. What we've done is incorporate the OT element within that singular team, and they found that to be a really, really positive step going forward and delivering some really good outcomes for children and young people. We have a clear action plan, as I've said, and we've started incorporating some of those actions, those areas of improvement into the action plan going forward, and that was attached as part of the appendix, and I won't run through the whole of the action plan. Those are the key points, Chair, that I'd like to land.
Thanks very much. Barry?
Thank you, Chair. Quite happy to take the report as read as peer review. Shows our pros and cons, what we need to improve. So just take that back a step, and I think Matt referred to it earlier on, that we've got number of unitaries, 15 shires, and we pick our peer reviews from that. And I'm assuming we've picked the people we wanted to do the peer review. So we've got Derby, West Northampton, Notts councils who we've used. So to take the report as read, for me, I'd like to know why we picked those three councils to say that what we've got is a good peer review group. What was the reasoning behind it?
Yeah, I'll respond to that one. So, as I said earlier, our sector-led improvement work is done across the East Midlands. What happens is that each authority in the East Midlands commits to having one peer review every 2 years. Each Director of Adult Services agrees to chair and lead a review in another authority. So in our case, it was the director from Derby City who was allocated to Leicestershire, and later on this year I'm going into Lincolnshire to lead a review in Lincolnshire. And then once the key line of inquiry has been agreed, and as I said, we get to choose it. So we decided that we wanted to look at this particular area of work. Once that's been agreed, what then happens is that colleagues from across the East Midlands, 10 authorities in the East Midlands, who are knowledgeable and experienced in this particular field, are asked if they will be part of the peer review process in Leicestershire. So we had a head of service from Nottinghamshire. We had an assistant director from West Northamptonshire. We had a commissioner from Nottingham City. The practice elements were led by the principal social worker from Derby City. So what happens is that essentially the East Midlands ADAS office go out and ask for volunteers to come and do the review. So that's how they're chosen.
Other questions? Sure.
Yes, thank you very much. Good to read the peer review. There are lots of recommendations as well. I'll take it as read though on those recommendations. I just want to know about the action plan and the timescales of implementing some of those, because some of those are detailed, but some of them will take time to progress. I just want to know your thoughts behind how you're going to get to the next peer review, having addressed most, if not all, of these concerns.
Completely got to get into that bit. So there are short-term actions which we've already started and they'll be delivered in a fairly rapid time frame. But there are longer-term plans that will take a lot more than just ourselves, involving our partners, our stakeholders, families. So they take a little bit more time. And part of this is also changing the culture. It's not just about the local authorities, it's about families, the communities, partners externally. So those will take a longer time. And I think we've got time frames in the actual action plan. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, so I think majority of the actions that are in the action plan, they're due to run up till the end of the year, and we're optimistic that we'll be able to meet those. Some of the actions are tied into the wider corporate review of preparation for adulthood, and they'll take a bit longer, so they'll take us into the new year. And like Santot says, we've already started to implement a lot of the smaller, softer changes. We've already started to implement those as part of the action plan.
And we've had a couple of workshops already with families and carers, so that started the ball. And my understanding is, unless I'm wrong, John, there'll be regular reporting at certain times of the year.
Yes, I think in Joel's question, we spoke about this at the earlier brief, and I think what we're going to do is ask John and colleagues to report back to this group we suggested March, but we keep that under review because that then is sufficient time for a lot of the actions to have been taken and for the team to assimilate the results of those actions rather than saying, can you let us know 2 days afterwards what happened. So I think we're looking for an update report on the plan in March, which I think would be sensible and suitable. If that everybody's agreed to that, we'll put that on the chart for future work for this committee, Joel. Any further questions? I suppose just one from me, and I didn't get a sense of it going through it. It's all right. I know someone extremely well who's having issues with a child in a different county, not this one, I hasten to add, and the EHCP plans and all those sort of things. And in talking to both of them at length, it seems to me that in their particular county, that the parent almost gets neglected and pushed out, and decisions being made with the child without the knowledge or agreement of the parent. How do we balance that between the rights of the parent and the rights of the children? And do you believe that's been adequately reflected in this appraisal of how our system operates?
Mike, yeah, I will get into it. How it's balanced, I think, from an operational kind of practice point of view, that there comes a time in that young person's life when they have to be seen and treated by the law and ourselves as an adult, and where they have that capacity and have that understanding. In days gone by, used to be Gillick competency of a child at the age of 16 to make decisions in their own right. Parents might not agree with it, but they've got capacity and insight to do that. Now we use the Mental Capacity Act, and I know recent case law has pushed it back into the world of children's in terms of we need to be implementing the MCA from the age of 16 onwards for those children that have that insight and capacity. But you then have to balance it out in terms of there's a need for the parent as well to be informed and kept updated if that's what the child or the young adult is agreeing to it as well. So there is a balance, and it's fundamentally, as long as you keep it legally compliant, and we're looking at it from a pure kind of humanistic adult perspective, there's something around fully understanding that actually the carers, the parents, also are part of that young person's support mechanisms. And if we can get it right for both parties, we stand a really good chance of achieving those outcomes that the young person wants to deliver. It is a difficult one because, in all fairness, some parents are over-involved, quite rightly, totally understand that, and it's very hard to let go of that sometimes. So the trick of the practitioner is to have that balanced, informed conversation at every meeting they have with the family and the individual themselves. But I think you have to be mindful of the law as well. Hopefully that helps.
Well, it's an interesting one. I'll just reflect on my knowledge of what's happening somewhere else against what might be happening here. And, you know, this is a 14-year-old child who seems to be, you know, getting preferential treatment over and above what the parent would want.
Sorry, just on that, age is really critical in these conversations, because when you get to 16, then you look at MCA. Sorry, and whereas prior to that, you have to look at parents' consent as well.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Any further questions? Well, could I thank Santok and Claire for coming on? We look forward to, I assume you'll be coming back in March with this, so we look forward to greeting you again in March and to actually have a more detailed look at the action plan and how we've achieved against it. But thank you very much for that. We're now moving on to, got this wrong this morning, didn't I? But this is the last agenda item today. Which is report on the Leicestershire County Council Adult Social Care Regulated Services, pages 125 to 136 of your report. And I'll get this right this time. So Santok is staying, and he's been joined by Tracy Ward, Assistant Director, again, just to pick out the salient points of the report, and then we'll take questions afterwards. Wait a minute, have I got someone else who's snuck in? Well, welcome, Zubair. I don't think you're on my list of people here, so that's probably my fault. But the more the merrier, that's all what I say. So who's picking this one up? Santok?
I promise you I get the hang of it at some point. Halfway through, I'm going to hand over to Tracy for part of the report as well. So I think it's just important to remind the members that really the services highlighted in this report, and I'm going to talk about 3 of the services, so shared lives, short breaks, and supported living. They actually contribute to the county council's strategic plan and adult and community department plan, which is delivering wellbeing and opportunities in Leicestershire. So it's part and parcel helping to deliver that, the wider plan here. There's a list of services we've put in there that are 4 supported living provisions. I won't read all of them that are in the report, and there are 3 short breaks provisions. With regards to short breaks provision, just to remind colleagues and members that they provide overnight respite and short break for vulnerable adults, and also help families from breaking up by actually giving them that space and that capacity to recharge. And the staff are fully trained, and they also are trained in delivering some of the delegated health tasks as well. So if there's a task that needs to be delivered that would normally be done by a health colleague, we've got that training, we've got that permission and that authority, that agreement to deliver that. Overall, we've got number of beds available across the three. We're talking 24 units, and occupancy, nights occupied through in 23-24 was 3,728. And the number of registered people across the services in total is 124. And that's an area we're looking to improve going forward. The level of occupancy is impacted by the staffing levels. It's fair to say if you don't have the staff, you cannot provide that service for people that may present in certain ways. So you have to balance it out, and that's one of the issues that we're trying to tackle, is making sure our recruitment is, we're actually on top of our recruitment, certainly in areas like Melton, which is pretty rural, but we need to get more staff into those areas. The short breaks services that we're talking about generally are Melton short breaks, we've got the Tree short breaks and Carlton Drive short breaks. As you're aware in the report, 2 of these are very good. The latter 2 were graded good by CQC. The former one was required improvements, but we're actually delivering actions and trying to get that back to good in a very rapid time frame to actually get it to the standard that we're used to anyway in the past, and we want to get it to that point. The key areas that we need to focus on in order to deliver that from the feedback was enhancing our MCA training, mental capacity training for our staff to make sure they capture the consent of the individual at the starting point of their journey with us. We're looking at enhancing our safeguarding training. That's just about repeating the training so staff absolutely have it at the forefront of their thinking and their intervention, and that's already in place and is progressing. And also being aware of how to report safeguarding. Again, that's just reminding, because we have a turnover of staff, we just need to remind staff, new staff coming in all the time, constantly. And then fundamentally making sure our staff are fully trained. And again, that is in momentum as we're talking, and things are progressing quite nicely. In terms of the impact, I think it's always important to kind of make members aware the impact of the service at the front end for me is measured by the feedback we get from our citizens, from our people who use the services. And I've put a couple in there. There's a few in there that we've put in the report, but what I want to read out is the first one, which is each time he stays, he picks up extra skills. Just little things mainly, but for him, that's a big deal in such a short period of time. It makes me feel better about his eventual transition from home to his own accommodation. That's crucial, because what that tells me is our staff do not just hold them and warehouse them when they're with them. They're actually actively working on their independence, on individual skill sets, and that's really critical for us if we're going to make sure people become independent. And I won't read the rest out for you. They're there, and I think it's always important to really read those. Moving on to the supported living services. These are services that provide domiciliary care or domiciliary support for people who have learning disabilities in shared accommodation, reside with the tenancy, so they have their own tenancy. The issues we're facing mainly in the Melton area, as I said earlier, was recruitment, and we're working on that. I'm sure Severe will let us know what we're doing to tackle that. We have looked at recruitment overseas. That's been proven a little bit difficult. One of the other issues that's proven difficult is that we generally offer part-time contracts because it's mainly shift work and weekend work, and it's not appealing to everybody. But we are focused on enhancing that going forward. In terms of Melton supported living, Waterlea supported living, and Smith Crescent, we have 36 units in total. All 3 services are rated good by CQC. So again, we can be assured that actually our standards and our provision is at the level we want it to be. And again, I just want to give some feedback on that, because it's about measuring impact for me. And I quote, "I live here to become independent. Waterleas helps me learn things for my future." Again, really critical. That's another service area that we're responsible for delivering independence, working with the individual. "I feel safe and like to go out alone. I am independent." That is the biggest outcome we can deliver for young people and vulnerable adults, is making them independent as possible. And to be recognised for that, I think, is excellent, and a credit to the staff. With regards to Shared Lives scheme, we have a really good Shared Lives scheme, and they provide a personalised service, maintaining autonomy and living independently in the community. So they actually offer their home, their space and their time for vulnerable adults. It's almost like the starting point of accommodation pathway. The Shared Lives is the starting point before you even consider supported living or residential care. It's a well-established scheme, has been going since Sapphire birthday is 20, how many years is Sapphire? 40 years, that's a pretty good game. I'm still learning. We have 78 shared life carers registered within the scheme who look after 42 individuals in terms of long-term living arrangements, which I think is really good, but there's room there for us to expand and get on board more carers. But we also offer 60 individuals respite arrangements. So you can see it's developing. It's not just respite, we're offering short-term breaks within that as well. The scheme caters for people living with dementia, young persons in transitions from foster care, people with a learning disability of physical impairment or mental health needs, and persons who are leaving hospital but not ready yet to go home. So we offer them that kind of support before they're ready fully. As I said, the main issue for us with the shared lives is increasing the number of carers, which we're seeking to do. Last inspected in December 2022 and is rated good, and that hasn't changed, so we're really proud of that as well, absolutely. And again, I just want to read out the impact that it delivers. And I quote, "I like to go to Shared Lives Carer. We have a good chat together, and I am looking forward to our Christmas festivities planning." So there's hope there, there's aspirations and future thinking, which I think is really good. I'm just going to hand you over to Tracy.
Thanks, Samtok. So I'll provide information related to our home care assessment reablement team and also our urgent home care assessment reablement team. The council's aim is to support people to be as independent as possible and live in their own homes for, again, as long as possible. But the urgent service also provides people with support at point of crisis. So what we aim to do is prevent admissions to residential care or hospital, and that's generally a short-term service. The service works in a multidisciplinary team way. So we work with physiotherapists, community health partners, to deliver what's called the triple R approach, so recovery, reablement and rehabilitation, again to support maximising independence. So the service can be delivered and is non-chargeable for up to 6 weeks, although the average duration for somebody's stay in the reablement service is approximately 2 weeks, and that's either that we've identified that people have got ongoing needs for care and support, and we work with them to move those people out to independent sector domiciliary care providers, or they've reached the maximum independence, so they transfer out of the service without support. There's obviously information about what types of support the service delivers, so that's personal care and support, helping people with meal and drink preparation, working with partners around maximising independence around mobility and those sorts of things. The heart emergency service, again, is something that we've transitioned more recently to help the service deliver more cost-effective services. It's now aligned to the footprint related to the heart service. And that's something that we put into place in June of this year. The urgent heart focus is generally a position for up to 72 hours. And then again, what we'd look at is if people have got ongoing reablement needs or they need long-term support, we'd look at how we support those people to transition out. And we'd also look at information relating to any charging assessments that need to be completed about charging for ongoing need. So on average, the heart service commences 100 new packages of reablement support per week. It's a key element in managing demand for adult social care and ensuring that we utilise our resources effectively. Just to pick up on a couple of the performance measures, you'll see in the report that in line with national kind of criteria, we achieve better results than partners of 89.6% who leave the service with no going on support. And a second indicator that indicates that on 91 days post-discharge, our performance is at 89.1% compared to a national average of 82.3%. So the service is registered with CQC and was last inspected in December 2019. The service is currently rated as good. A review of the information and data available to CQC about heart was undertaken in July 2023, and the CQC Care Quality Commission did not evidence that there was a further need for ongoing assessment. So as I've alluded to, we've revised the current model of the delivery to basically reduce carbon footprints in respect of travel time and cost of the department. With that restructure also supports that we've got access to funding via discharge grant to further bring in people into the service to deliver further enablement outcomes for individuals. We're awaiting further outcome, obviously changes in recent government, to see whether the discharge grants become on a kind of more firmer footing, so that we can maximise that potential. As you can see, the resulting increased weekly revenue starts from April to July 2023. The average was 79.71, which increased to 97.76 for this year. Just in respect of some of the feedback, obviously Sam talked about the feedback that's really positive in respect of what we received in respect of the service. So there are a couple of examples contained within the report, but the feedback in respect of Rose says, all the carers were kind and compassionate. They introduced themselves and helped me to shower. I feel safe at times and have never felt rushed. Overall, I feel it was a very positive experience, and I've achieved the aim of improving my confidence to shower alone. So this was somebody who came into the service via mental health services. Just in respect of the resource implications, what I'm going to do is hand you back to Santok to talk about the direct service provision for building-based services, and I'll pick up the components related to the medium-term financial strategy for heart and the urgent service.
Just to feedback, there were 2 targets set for our internal services. One was in 23-24 review, direct services, day service, short breaks, savings target of 430,000, which was delivered, and then re-provision of in-house day services and a target of 300,000. So we've got that grip. We're delivering efficiencies as we deliver good services going forward.
So just in respect of the heart services, improvement outcomes from home care assessment and rearmament, the team have set up a savings target of 230,000, and again in alignment of the heart and CRS service, which is now the heart urgent service. Projected savings were again £230,000, and that's again about reducing things like the carbon footprint and better utilisation of our resources. There are further savings targets on track to be achieved. So improving outcomes for heart CRS savings targets 1.27 million, the total of 1.5 million, which includes the provision, the previously achieved 230,000 for 23-24. In respect of recruitment and retention, both services have key elements that we're undertaking. In heart, we have a worker who's got particular portfolio that is looking about recruitment and retention. We have ongoing recruitment, and what we're also doing is looking at why people are leaving the service. For the heart service, what I would say is the workforce is an ageing workforce, and so what we've got to look at doing is replacing that with newer people coming into the service. So that's it in respect of my component.
Thank you all. Barry?
Thank you, Chair. Sam, going back to the short breaks bed utilisation, obviously we're at the moment we're probably utilising about 40% utilisation. I know you said it's staffing levels that determine. How many people do we disappoint that we can't actually provide the service for?
Yeah, in terms of the referral processes, we haven't really turned down any cases, so they do come in. In the report, there is a reduced number of referrals into the services at the moment. However, we do utilise all 3 provisions. So if there are capacity issues at Melton, one of the other units can be used for capacity reasons.
So in reality, although we're not fully utilising it, at the same time, we're not disappointing anybody. We're looking after people well.
Throw something at me. So there's that degree of flexibility across the staff, and I think the mindset of staff is really where it needs to be, that they're actually willing, and then they will step up. So again, there's another positive in there.
Just Chair, and then just come back on the heart team. I've experienced the heart team. My father came out of hospital 18 months ago. They were fantastic. Couldn't praise them enough. Worth every penny of what they did in helping him get back on his feet. But the NHS didn't do a too good job in putting him into that position in the first place, but they did a fantastic job of helping us get him back to where it should be.
Thank you. That's really positive to receive that feedback, and quite often we've given a couple of examples within the report, but the feedback is generally positive. I think there are some issues that we need to address. The issue of people being told that the service is free for a 6-week period. That's the duration that was generally set around the maximum enablement period. But on occasions, people are misinformed by partner organisations and think that it's a free service. It's a non-chargeable service until we've assessed eligible need or people need to exit the service. So the more people we're able to enable within a shorter time frame, the more people can bring into the service. So that's our aim, to increase the maximum capacity of people that will get that better outcome.
Thank you very much. I'm going back to page 127 and the service for the short break service and the chart there. And I'm pleased to see that although it requires improvement, it has been inspected by the CQC. I understand that the CQC have no set schedule. I am disappointed in a way, because it would be nice to have it reconfirmed that for the Hinckley and for the Widgston places, they were last inspected in 2017 and 2019, and they were done as good, which is great, but 2017 is 7 years ago, and 2019 is 5 years ago. And are we entitled to ask for an inspection, or and standards have changed, things have changed, we've been through the pandemic and everything. And how will we encourage the CQC to inspect more regularly? I mean, these are vulnerable people and specialised areas. And I do think a 7-year gap, I mean, I would hope we are still good, but do we have an internal way of satisfying ourselves that we are good, or are we reliant completely on the CQC?
John is looking very keen to answer this question, Hillary.
Very keen. We're not entitled to ask for inspection. I mean, we could do. Nothing to stop us doing that. It doesn't mean that the CQC would have to respond. You may or may not be aware that at the end of July, there was a report published, an interim report published by Dr. Penelope Dash, which was, I think it hit the headlines, which was around the operation of the Care Quality Commission. And there's the final report is due out this month. So later this month, the final report will be published. But certainly within the interim report, Dr. Dash did make a number of comments about concerns around the operational effectiveness of the CQC, and particularly in regards to the delay in assessing both health and social care establishments. So the CQC are responsible for not just social care establishments, but also hospitals, primary care, dental care, and now local authorities. And I think within that report, the figure of 3.7 years was given as an average wait for a reassessment. And there are a number of providers who have never been assessed. So about 25% of providers have never had an assessment. Some of those will be new providers, obviously. The oldest wait for assessment was 2015. So there are some providers who haven't been assessed since 2015. There are some hospitals and healthcare providers who haven't been assessed since 2011. So there are clearly some issues, and I think the CQC, prior to the pandemic, the CQC were doing around 16,000 assessments a year. I think in the last 12 months, or 12 months after the pandemic, they were doing 7,000. So, and there are, as you probably aware, tens of thousands of providers that require assessment. So it is a concern. It is a concern, and we would like those assessments to be completed more regularly. We do get, as Tracy mentioned, we get regularly correspondence from the CQC to ask us whether or not there is anything that's changed, and we have to submit a form to say what's changed on, and et cetera, et cetera. And on the basis of that, they do a sort of a tabletop, desktop kind of review, but it's not a full reassessment. So we, I think everybody would argue that the CQC is under-resourced and needs to assess more regularly. And certainly, we've got, for the first time now in a number of years, we've got a service that's got a required improvement label on it. The actions that we're taking will address the concerns that were raised in short order, but we might not get another assessment for 3 years. And that means that particular service will have that label for 3 years.
Can I address that? Christine adds that first, Hilary. She just wants to.
Yeah, can I assure the committee and any residents that are listening in that when it came to the attention of both Ted and myself about needing requirement for improvement, that we went out to see the site and we were shown round by the staff and everything, and we were well assured that the stuff that was picked up by CQC was being looked at. So Ted and I were very pleased with our visit, weren't we, Ted?
Well, we made 2 pages of notes. We also heard anecdotal evidence from service users' parents that actually contacted people like Zubir without even being asked to comment on the findings, saying that they didn't recognise them, and in fact, in an appeal, some of the areas for improvement were withdrawn.
Thanks, Christine. Ted, back to you, Hilary.
Thank you. Please don't take what I've pointed out as a criticism of Leicestershire County Council, Adults and Community, and the work you're doing, because I'm not. My criticism is with the CQC. And some years ago, as an anecdote, my sister nearly died in a care home, not in this county, nowhere near this county, from lack of care in a place that was highlighted as good, but it hadn't been inspected for 5 years. It had changed ownership, it had changed everything. So CQC, in fairness, moved in within a week, but it was up to the family to complain. Now, is there anything that as councillors rather than officers that would help by any actions we could take, saying that we are disappointed, or should we contact our MPs, or should we contact CQC direct? Because I think it would reassure the staff and the county council that we are doing the very best. And I fully appreciate what the lead member and the support member have done and the officers have done. I am not criticising them at all. It's whether we can do anything to slightly push CQC around on with their own thing that they say that their average should be far less than 7, 8, 10, 11 years. Thank you.
I suppose it's a tricky one. I mean, I'll probably come back to John and or Christine, but, John, I think, has highlighted the issues with the report that's been made and the final report, which is due out this month. So in some ways, it would probably be sensible to wait the report this month to see what that suggests about the CQC going forward. And then perhaps for Christine as the portfolio holder to pick that one up if there is issues we feel that need to be done to assure councillors that all is well with the world. I mean, I think these sort of overview and scrutiny meetings do a lot of good in that, but as you say, it's getting out to the wider members. But I know Tracy is waving at me frantically.
Just around some reassurance in respect of our own in-house services, both the services managed by Santok and services managed by myself will have regular updates in respect of quality and performance internally. I think one of the things is, you've highlighted the issues related to CQC and the inspection regime and how long that's taking. We focused in this meeting on the in-house services, but we also have a third assistant director, Indy Lahau, who works with our independent sector providers. And if we do have particular issues related to quality and performance or complaints or issues about people having unsafe practices, there's a mechanism by which we highlight those to the CQC, and CQC will risk rate those providers themselves, take on board the information that we've shared with them, and then bring forward inspections if they're required.
Just thank you for that, Tracy. I just wonder if there is, I think part of what Hillary's highlighting is perhaps there is a gap between us as members seeing a poor risk rating and it being in place for several years, and members being assured that that's being taken. So perhaps there's without reinventing the wheel or causing huge amounts of work, something that can be done to inform members internally so that they are available to answer any questions from concerned residents about the rating of a particular place, and that can provide that assurance to our residents if we're called upon to do so, that that's okay. So perhaps that's something, John, you could take away and think about. With I said I don't expect an answer today, but or unless you want to give one, but without reinventing the wheel, just so that members are aware. So particularly those who might get more asked if the items, if the place is in their particular ward, even though the residents might come from anywhere. But if you want to pick that up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Without reinventing the wheel, we do have a process by which we brief local members when there is a home closure or a service closure, or where a service is rated inadequate by the CQC. So we could look at that process, and we could potentially extend that for other concerns as well. So that's one process that we can use that's not onerous. As Tracy said, colleagues in our commissioning teams do alert the CQC to where we've got concerns, and the CQC will respond to those concerns. They do operate, because as I said, they're trying to do 16 to 20,000 assessments with capacity to do 7 to 10,000, it would appear at the moment. So they do take a risk-based approach. So when I said, we could ask for the CQC to reassess some of our services because of that risk-based approach, if they're rated as good currently, it's unlikely they're going to get to the top of CQC's list. But certainly the service that's recently been rated as requires improvement, we do from time to time give the CQC a list of services within Leicestershire that we think have done the work that was required of them, and ask the CQC to go back out and reassess them to see whether or not they can get a better rating. Where we think that's deserved, and certainly the Melton service is one of the ones that we would look at to do that.
Leon?
If it helps, recently the CQC was criticised and was well publicised for many shortcomings and failings.
Bill?
Very briefly, Chair. We're talking about, can't complete these things because of lack of staff. What we're doing about trying to get the staff in place so we can provide more short-term breaks. I mean, are we redesigning the service? Are we promoting other people from outside to come in to do work, or what is actually happening?
It's certainly part of the action plan in terms of what we can do to, one, make the job seem more attractive to people coming in. As the point was made earlier, it's an aging population, some of our workforce is, so we need to try and get more younger people into it. So how do we make it more attractive? We've looked at international recruitment. That's proven quite difficult. We will be looking at the actual job specs themselves. So there's a piece of work that we've got as part of the action plan to take it forward and address it. I think the biggest problem we have, or the biggest barrier, is that it's such a rural area that it's very hard for people to commute on a regular basis if you don't have your own car, and then it's expensive. So there's a lot more work to be done, if I'm absolutely honest with you, Councillor. Do you want to add anything to it? That's fine.
That's not true for Melton, but the Carlton Drive one is easy to get to, and Hinkley one's easy to get to. It's only Melton one that's difficult for transport. So it doesn't hold good for all of them.
I think we're also looking at different ways that we can attract people in. So looking at different platforms for advertising for vacancies that we've got. So there's a whole range of things. I think, Santo, you were kind of pointing out some of the difficulties we have in the more remote locations, but like say transport links into Hinkley into Wigston are better. But it's about widening that reach, I guess, for people that may be attracted into the service. So there's a whole range of things that Zubair and I are looking at with our HR partners to attract more people to come and take up those vacancies.
Just in respect of heart as well, subject to our recent Human Resources Action Plan, one of the things that we looked at was consultation with the staff about why they potentially were leaving the service for the heart urgent component. And that was about having to travel significant distances, so that we're having less hands-on work with individuals. And I think both from Claire and Zubair's perspective and from a heart perspective, we have a short form of recruitment now, don't we? So people can be brought into the services more promptly if you get them trained and into the services more effectively than perhaps some of the recruitment processes that we've had historically in place.
And I do think the reality is it's a multifaceted issue that you have to try all the different, going early into the FE establishments, try and get them earlier there, going into the schools, trying to make the whole career pathway attractive as possible. So it is multifaceted, and that's why I think there's a clear plan for us to address that from take a kind of whole holistic approach to it.
Joe?
Cheers, thank you very much, Chair. I think we have to praise the team, actually. They've done incredibly well. If you look at the resource implications to make those savings and also to deliver the services, yes, there's going to be some creak in the system there, but all praise goes to it because you're still delivering the service to a higher degree than I thought would be possible. So yeah, well done on that one. I think praise is due back to yourselves, but also to your teams as well for delivering on that. I do take the point on recruitment. It's just not in social care in Leicestershire, it's everywhere. There's an issue. So it's one there where we're competing against numerous other employers to get employees into our vacancies. So that I think will be forever a challenge. But yeah, you just need to explore all those avenues you can. But I just want to end on a positive to say well done to the team because the savings that you've made are astounding actually, and you're still delivering the service. So well done.
Thanks, Joe. I know when we had chairman's briefing this morning, John, we talked about the occupancy rates under paragraph 8 for the short breaks, and I think you mentioned there were some ideas the team were looking at for how they might maximise the use of those facilities. I just wonder if before we close, you could share those with the rest of the committee. Would be extremely useful.
Yes, yeah, up to. So we have a piece of work going on to review the short breaks and the supported living services, actually. In specific reference to the short breaks, there are 3 things that we're looking at. One is whether or not it's more economically advantageous to the council to purchase short breaks from the external market than to provide them directly. And part of that is because of the occupancy issue. So we have short break services have quite large and quite high fixed costs. There are some marginal costs in terms of occupancy, but a lot of the costs are fixed in terms of building and staffing. So we're looking at whether or not there is a market out there. The issue for the independent market is that you never get very high occupancy in short breaks services. So you will never get to 95% kind of occupancy, which if you're running a care home, you kind of want to be running it at probably over 92% if you can. You're not going to get that in short breaks. My experience, and I've been running them for over 20 odd years, is that, mid-70s is probably pretty good. And part of the reason for that is that it's not just the staffing issues which limit occupancy. You're also limited by when people want the breaks. So you can offer people breaks on a Tuesday and a Wednesday when actually what they want is a Friday to a Monday, a long weekend. So people don't always want the breaks when you've got the availability, and everybody wants them in the summer. And so the other thing is that sometimes your occupancy is limited by the needs of the individuals that you are supporting. So some of the people that we support in our short breaks, and it says in the report, we have units which are very well kitted out for people with very complex levels of disability and need. And that often means that if you've got one person in for that particular week, you might have to leave another bed empty and vacant because of the needs of that individual. You can't have lots of people around them. They need a quiet space, or they need more support. So that limits your occupancy. So you're never going to get very high occupancy, and that's a problem for the independent market, and that makes it very expensive to buy it independently. But we're doing the work anyway just to test that. The other things we're looking at is to see whether or not we could sell some of our spare capacity. So there are other authorities like Leicester City, for example, who don't operate their own internal services. So it might well be that we could have a conversation with the city to say, well, look, we've got a bit of spare capacity, got a number of beds that we're not utilising. You're buying them in the independent sector because I'm having to buy them somewhere. Could we do a deal with them or other councils to say, actually, we could sell you some of our capacity? And equally, there's a similar conversation with health services, with the NHS, who also have responsibility for providing breaks through continuing healthcare and other. And then the third option is to say, well, actually, even within Leicestershire, colleagues in children's services are also spending a lot of money buying respite provision for disabled children, families. And they don't have their own internal services at the moment. They are building some. Yeah, we're doing some work with Bernardo's, and we're building some internal services, but it probably won't meet all of their needs. So here's an opportunity, something we've never looked at before, where you could actually provide breaks for children and adults in a similar service. So if the Trees, for example, it has 2 wings. You could potentially separate the 2 wings. You could provide a break for a young person at the Trees. And then when they become an adult, when they go through the transition and go into adult services, they may continue to need short breaks, and they'll be getting them in the same environment. So there could be some beneficial outcomes for individuals, for young people. So we're doing that work at the moment, and we're hoping that that will be completed by the end of the year, and we'll be able to report that back at that point.
Thank you for that, John. I just wanted to reassure the committee following our discussion this morning that the whole team is looking at how we can best maximise the facilities. And this is not just about saving money, but as John has alluded to, providing the best results for the residents of Leicestershire of all ages. And if we can achieve more for our residents, so much the better, as well as mitigating the costs. So it was just to allude to the fact that the team are working at pace to ensure that what looks like a major under-occupancy rate in some of the facilities can be usefully addressed if we possibly can. But put in the context of what John said, that sometimes you're never going to get to those percentages, nor would we ever want to, because that would then be to the detriment of some of those people using the facilities. So if we have no further questions, because I'll go along the line, Zubair, Tracy, Claire and Santok for presenting the case to us, and actually, I think, having a very useful conversation with members. So thank you very much for that. So that is the last substantive item today. So members are asked to note the date of the next meeting, which is on the 4th of November 2024. There were no items that were taken as urgent, so could I thank everybody for attending today, and particularly all the councillors for the questions they've asked, and wish you a good afternoon. Well, if it reads silently,